Hi, my name is Pallavi Pratap and welcome to my channel. I hope you're all safe. Today I want to discuss a very recent judgment which is called as Indus Biotech Private Limited versus Kotak India Ventures. There was an arbitration petition which was filed by the petitioner under section 11.3 read with section 11.4a of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996, where it was sought that there should be an arbitrator who should be appointed and an arbitral tribunal should be constituted in order to adjudicate the disputes that had arisen between the parties. Now, the petition was filed before the Honorable Supreme Court because respondent number 1, which is the Kotak Ventures Offshore Limited, was a Mauritius based company, and therefore dispute then would qualify for a recourse which had to be settled through international arbitration. So, it is to be noted that respondent number 2 to 4 were all Indian entities. The petitioner was also an Indian entity. However, because respondent number 1 was an international entity based out of Mauritius, therefore it was important that it should be an international arbitration which should be there, and the arbitral tribunal should be subsequently constituted. You would see that the constitution of arbitral tribunal actually emanates from share subscription and shareholders agreement, and there was many supplemental agreements which were there as incidental upon the main agreement. Now, as per the said agreement, the respondent actually subscribed to equity shares and optionally convertible redeemable preference shares, which are also called as OCRPS, in the petitioner company. Now, before we actually proceed further, you would want to know what is OCRPS. So, I would just give you a very brief understanding of it. Basically, these are the class of shares that can be converted into equity shares either at the option of the holder or at the option of the company. So, here OCRPS was to be converted. However, during the course of the business, the petitioner company decided to make something which is called as QIPO, which is called as, if you would understand the abbreviation, it is called as Qualified Initial Public Offering. Now, here arose a problem since SEBI regulations very clearly stipulate that if a company has any outstanding convertible securities, which basically means the OCRPS, that would entitle any person with an option to receive equity shares of the issuer, then they cannot, they cannot be entitled to make QIPO, which is the qualified IPO. Now, therefore, it became necessary for the respondents to convert their preference shares into equity shares. Now, negotiations began between the petitioner company and the respondents, and with regards to calculation and conversion formula, there were separate formulas which were suggested by the respondent company, and there was a separate formula which was being identified by the petitioner company. So, now when we come to the conversion formula to be applied for converting these preferential shares into equity shares, the dispute arose, and this is the crux of the entire proceedings which took place before the Honorable NCLT and also subsequently before the Honorable Supreme Court. Now, the dispute arose here when the respondents, as per the formula that they had come up with, calculated that 30% of total paid up share capital in equity shares were to be converted, whereas the petitioner company, upon the basis of valuation that they had done, they said that the respondents were basically entitled to about 10% of total paid up share capital. Now, this is where the huge discrepancy came, because Kotak Venture was thinking about 30% as per the formula that they had applied, whereas the petitioner said that no, it would only amount to about 10%. The respondents actually contended that the OCRPS was not disputed. It was said that OCRPS was acceptable. However, the amount at the time of redemption which was to be paid by the petitioner company, that was in dispute, because upon redemption of OCRPS, an amount of nearly 370 odd crores became due and payable. So, when the company demanded, when the respondent demanded this amount from the company, it was not paid, and therefore it constituted as a default. This is the point that the respondents made. Now, the respondents therefore considered that because there was a default, they approached the NCLT. They filed a Section 7 petition for appointment of resolution professional, where in this Section 7 proceeding, this is where the controversy actually arises. In this Section 7 petition, the petitioner company filed a miscellaneous application which was under Section 8 of the Arbitration Act. Now, NCLT Mumbai actually allowed the application filed by the petitioner company, which is the Section 8 application filed under the Arbitration Act, and so Section 7 petition which was under the IBC was dismissed. Now, you can see that there were so many parallel proceedings which are going on. So, the Honorable Court then noted that since the agreements and the arbitration clause were never in dispute, the apex court was only to decide upon the petition which was filed under Section 11 of the Act. But what was important was also to notice that since the nature of arbitral tribunal is to be considered as one which is the nature of international arbitration, while there is also a similar proceeding between petitioner company and respondent numbers 2 to 4, which would be of domestic nature, and also the fact that NCLT had already entertained a Section 8 application, when basically if you look at it, the whole understanding of IBC is that there is a legal duty which is cast upon NCLT to proceed strictly in accordance with the provisions of IBC, especially in this case of Section 7 of IBC. Therefore, there being a default, the dispute sought to be raised is not arbitrable after the insolvency proceeding has commenced. So now, interestingly, the respondent company actually filed an SLP against the order of NCLT. Now, the respondents contended that they did not have the remedy of appeal, as the order disposing application under Section 61 of the IBC was not really passed, and it was only pertaining to the arbitral the arbitral application which was filed, the miscellaneous application under Section 8 of the Arbitration Act. So, since the arbitration petition was already pending before the apex court on the date of order passed by NCLT, the matter was examined on merits before the Honorable Supreme Court. Now, as far as Section 7 is concerned, there are primarily 4 major points. There should be a debt, default should have occurred, debt should be due to the financial creditor, and such default which has occurred should be by a corporate debtor. So, these are the 4 points which are specifically cast upon. Now, duties again cast upon on the adjudicating authority to determine if default can be evidenced from the records which were furnished. Now, for respondent number 1, Dr. Singhvi was appearing, and he contended that proceedings under Section 7 of IBC are actually action in rem. So, therefore, such insolvency and winding up matters are non-arbitrable, and that is exactly the scheme that IBC was introduced with. Now, if you look at the parent agreement, which was the SSA-SHA agreement, which was provided for, which basically talked about how the OCRPS could be redeemed, and it said that when OCRPS is to be redeemed, it becomes payable within 15 days from the date of redemption. And since the debt was not paid within the stipulated time as given in the parent agreement, it constituted as default. Therefore, the learned adjudicating authority should have looked into that aspect alone, and that whatever application was filed under Section 8 of the 1996 Act was completely without jurisdiction. Now, if we look at it as per the code, as per the IBC code, we see that the adjudicating authority, if it is satisfied as to whether a default has occurred or not, the corporate debtor is entitled to show that default has not occurred. So, if let us say for a minute financial creditor comes and says that no, there is a default, the corporate debtor has to show that there is no default that has occurred and the debt is not due. So, that would basically mean that the adjudicating authority determines whether a default has in fact occurred, and then only will look at commencement of CIRP and proceed with the date of admission. Now, from that point onwards, when the default has been accepted, then the dispute cannot be arbitrable. This is the most important part of this judgment. In the event that such petitions are entertained, then a profit making company which is ably being run, has been discharging its debts in a very planned manner, will then unnecessarily be pushed into CIRP, and this is happening quite often. I mean, for instance, Oyo Rooms happen to be, the NCLT proceedings just now happen to be a case in point. Now, let us just now look at specific observation which was there by the Honorable Supreme Court in this matter, and it was, however, the question which I feel is that remained was whether a grave error was committed by the adjudicating authority by observing in the course of the order as to whether invocation of arbitration was justified. So that basically meant that was it true that arbitrable, that the adjudicating authority actually had the power to invoke arbitration, and this is where the Honorable Supreme Court then held that the stage of proceeding at which the observation was made becomes relevant. What do we mean by observation here? Now, here it basically means that if the case had reached the state to the status of proceeding in rem, then such observation would not be justified. But since in the instant case the petition was yet to be admitted, it had not assumed the status of proceedings in rem. So the court then relied upon the recent judgment of Vidya Darulia also, which holds that the dispute will be non-arbitrable when a proceeding is in rem, and since IB court proceedings are considered to be in rem only after admission. So here what it meant was that if the section 7 petition was admitted, the CIRP would have commenced, the IRP would have been appointed, then the proceeding could be considered in rem, and therefore IBC would completely apply and arbitration could not apply. In the present case also, the position is slightly different. The adjudicating authority thus had to apply its mind and record a finding of default and admit the petition. Now, on admission, third party rights would then be created towards all the creditors of corporate debtor, and therefore the mere filing of a petition and its pendency before admission cannot be construed as triggering of a proceeding in rem. What basically this means is that if there is a petition which has been filed and it is not admitted, it cannot be considered that the IBC proceeding has been triggered. Further, there is also an important part that we have to look at, which is primarily section 238 of the IBC. Now, the position of law as far as IBC is concerned, especially when we look at section 238, is that it gives them gives IBC an overriding power over all other laws which are there. Therefore, the alleged corporate debtor who had filed an application under section 8 of the Arbitration Act, the independent consideration of the same was required dehouse the application filed under section 7 of the IBC. Thus, even if an application under section 8 was filed, the adjudicating authority was duty bound to first advert to the contentions which were put forth on the application filed under section 7 of the IBC, and it was required to record whether a default had occurred or a default had not occurred. And if then the adjudicating authority had held that debt is due and a default has occurred, then arbitration and the existence of said clause would have not made any difference, because that could not be arbitrable. But once the admission is made, the proceedings would get transformed in rem, and therefore arbitrability of the so-called inter se dispute will not arise. Now, in the event that the application is dismissed, the application here being section 7 application which is dismissed, then parties can secure the appointment of an arbitral tribunal, in an appropriate proceeding, and therefore the need for NCLT to pass order on Section 8 application would not arise. Now, in the instant case, the learned adjudicating authority had held in its order that the issue involved had not led to a stage of default having occurred, and had then rightly held that the claim of the company was to be decided through arbitration, and had left it on the Honorable Supreme Court to decide it. Now, the adjudicating authority was completely right in so far as it left it upon the Honorable Supreme Court to decide it. However, the Honorable Supreme Court then held that even though this was a correct position of law, however, it was important that the NCLT should have dismissed the Section 7 petition of the IBC first and then decided on Section 8 application. Now, this became a very interesting matter also because of this overlap of jurisdiction that we've seen pertaining to the IBC and also pertaining to the arbitration. Now, coming to the constitution of single arbitral tribunal, since the transaction between the parties was common one, and it would be efficacious to have one single tribunal, or should there be tribunals appointed in respect of each and every single agreement? Now, if there was each arbitral tribunal which was appointed under each and every agreement, then it would only have led to multiplicity of arbitration dispute resolution mechanism between the two parties. So, therefore, the reliance was placed on the judgment in the case of Duro Felguera SA, where there were 5 separate contracts, each having independent existence with separate arbitration clauses. There it was held that there cannot be a single arbitral tribunal for international commercial arbitration and also at the same time for domestic arbitration, and it was bifurcated accordingly. Thus, in the instant case also, the Honorable Supreme Court held that keeping in view the nature of the issues which were involved, being mainly with regard to conversion of preferential shares into equity shares and the formula which was to be determined, such consideration can be resolved by arbitral tribunal consisting of the same members, but separately constituted in respect of each agreement. So, since the members would remain the same, it was easier to have the the disputes adjudicated upon properly. Now, however, obviously the the modalities which were required was left upon the arbitral tribunal to decide as to how they would want to conduct the proceedings and how it is that they are going to hold separate proceedings in the agreement. Provided for international arbitration and also for clubbing the domestic disputes. I hope you would find this to be an interesting analysis. I at least found it to be very interesting. I hope you liked my video. If you have any further questions, you can always put it in the comment box below. Do like my channel and subscribe to my channel. Do share my videos and have a very safe time. Thank you so much.